I challenge you to ask gamers who are in their 20s or younger to name some Atari arcade games, and you'll probably hear the same few titles mentioned over and over. Heck, ask a gamer in their 30s and you'll probably get the same responses. They're likely to name Centipede, Asteroids, maybe Lunar Lander and Food Fight now that new games are out on those properties, and maybe something like Missile Command or Pong. And these are all great, classic Atari arcade games to be sure, but there are so many more that really push the limits of the arcade back in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s that seem to be forgotten by all except for those who were around during the time. And that's a real shame, because these titles are worth experiencing and playing today. So whether it's with real arcade cabinets or some solid emulation, these games are still as exciting and as addictive as ever. So today I want to highlight a few Atari arcade games that hardcore fans are sure to know, but the general gaming public seem to have left firmly in the past. I just want to show the games themselves, give a little history, and hopefully I'll help to keep these classics from being forgotten in the not too distant future. And personally, I think there's no better place to start than with Black Widow. If you love twin-stick shooters like I do, then Black Widow is one of the originators and you owe your gratitude to it. And it's definitely had some inspiration for games like Robotron, Smash TV, and a ton of others, at least in the control department. Black Widow was originally a conversion kit for Gravitar, and many of the original arcade cabinets were unsold Gravitar ones with some PCB board modifications and some new side art. The graphics are all vector-based, and the Atari 50th collection does a fantastic job emulating this style. You can even adjust the iconic glow that old vector displays had, but nothing beats the crisp, clean visuals of the actual vector display in the arcade. I personally feel that the best part of Black Widow is that it starts out very approachable, but gives you time to get comfortable with the controls. Things soon ramp up with new enemies and lots of them. It can be a real challenge to get very far in Black Widow, but you can have fun the whole time. As I said, this is the start of twin-stick shooting games, but it still manages to be an excellent example of the genre, and one worth experiencing. I recommend giving Black Widow a go if you're a fan of twin-stick shooters, fast-paced action arcade games, or if you just enjoy challenging video games in general. Outside of finding an arcade unit, you can experience it in the Atari 50th collection as I mentioned before. It's also in the Atari Anniversary Edition Redux for the original PlayStation, or in the Atari Anniversary Collection for PlayStation 2 and the first Xbox. And speaking of vector graphics, if you want to see what a truly complex game in that style could be, then look no further than in Major Havoc. This game is seriously like multiple games in one. It was released by Atari Inc. in 1984, and there's a few variants for the actual hardware. Dedicated units have a trackball for moving left and right, but there was a few conversion kits for older games like Tempest that would maintain the original spinner controls. But if you're emulating, then you're likely to use a controller with a D-pad or thumbstick, and I find that this game works just fine with those control methods. You'll encounter space shooter levels, lunar lander style sequences, and then finish with a platforming sequence. In some scenes, you'll even be moving through mazes, and it all adds up to a game that keeps you on your toes while playing. The controls for the platforming sections take some getting used to, but it's well worth learning to play if you ask me. The lunar lander sequences are a tad too easy, and it feels like a very minor part of the entire package. But please don't write off Major Havoc if you have a hard time getting a hang of the controls initially. It's a very rewarding and fun experience once you get the hang of it. The platforming parts definitely require the most patience, but once you retrain yourself on the controls and forget what you know about modern platforming games, the Major Havoc becomes a blast to play. If you want to experience it, then you can play it on the Atari Game Station Pro, the Atari 50th Collection, the Atari Anthology for the PS2 and OG Xbox, and on the Nintendo DS in the Atari Greatest Hits Collection Volume 2. But again, nothing beats the vector graphics of an actual arcade unit. But enough of vector games. I know that might not be everybody's cup of tea. It was cutting edge and beautiful for the time, but 3D is all the rage these days. Well, what if I told you that there was a fantastic three-dimensional game from 1984 that looks pretty good, plays well, and runs at a decent frame rate. You'd call me crazy, right? Well, sit down, child, and let me tell you of iRobot, one of the most intriguing games from Atari Inc. in the mid-'80s. Now, iRobot initially came out at a bad time and was considered a flop. Very few units were actually made, and it's a rare collectible today. In short, you're not likely to find a legit arcade cabinet in the wild, and it wasn't re-released anywhere until the Atari 50th collection. But this game is just incredible. There is a 3D art tool here too, but let's ignore that. It's a fun novelty of its time, but a little bit silly today. iRobot has you control a little flat-shaded robot around some blocks in a space field. Your mission? Turn all the red blocks blue. Once you do so, you can blow up the evil eye and fly to your next level. But don't let the eye catch you jumping about. Timing is everything, and you'll need to contend with a few enemies, such as birds and soccer balls. Overall, it's mostly a puzzle game with some fun action elements and shooter sections thrown in. And on the Atari 50th collection, it runs great, really smooth, and plays really well. You can also get it on the Atari Game Station Pro, but that version just doesn't play very well. At least not to me. The controls are just way too sensitive in that version. If you want to experience some of the best early 3D that Atari's arcade division had to offer, then the 50th collection is the way to go. In my opinion, iRobot has aged much better than some arcade games that would come 10 plus years later. And iRobot shows that a solid idea, when implemented correctly, goes a long way in creating a fun and addictive arcade game. And the last game I want to focus on in this video is also available on the Atari 50th collection. I could list tons and tons of arcade games in this video, but I think I want to save it for a part 2 and 3, etc., so we'll end after this game. Liberator was released by Atari Inc. into the arcades in 1982, and was part of the Atari Force collaboration with DC Comics. You could get one of 5 mini-comics that told of the Atari Force and their galactic missions. Atari stood for Advanced Technology and Research Institute, and would send a team of heroes out to save the universe or planets. There was even a full-size 20-issue comic run, and if you want to learn more about it, well, maybe I'll do a video in the future. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested. But let's get back to Liberator. It's sort of a reverse missile command as you attempt to destroy missile silos and bases from outer space. You have 4 spacecrafts that sit on each corner of the screen, and you can fire on the flashing red bases on each planet. You also must stop their missiles, and this is all done missile command style. If an enemy attack gets past your defenses, then one of your 4 ships will blow up, and you continue until all have been destroyed. You can fire quickly at any location on the screen when you have a full complement of ships, but it will become more difficult to fire quickly as you lose your ships. The gameplay works well, and while Liberator doesn't have the flashy early 3D or vector-based graphics of the last 3 games, it looks pretty good with its traditional 2D stuff. The planets rolling into view from the center is an impressive effect, even today, and I find everything to be very pleasing to the eyes. But like many arcade games of the era, this baby is tough. You need a lot of practice and skill to get anywhere, but you could always select which level you start at by holding the fire button when you press start. You can select between levels 1 all the way up to 22, but if you haven't been practicing, then you won't last long on the harder difficulty levels. If you're interested in playing Liberator, you can do so on the Atari 50th collection as I said before, or you can play it on the Atari Anthology for Xbox and PS2. It's well worth a try. And with that, we've covered 4 arcade games that the general public seems to have forgotten about. But for some of these games, well, it's really not their fault. Some arcade games just weren't a success for whatever reason, and a few others came out right at the end of Warner's time with Atari, meaning they had limited runs. But that doesn't mean these games aren't important to the history of video and arcade games, and it doesn't mean that you can't have fun while playing them. I encourage you to look beyond the common and traditional games, and see if you can find a hidden gem for yourself. Who knows? Maybe one of your new favorite games has been featured in this video, or it could be something that you play on a whim while exploring the company's wider library of games. But that's enough out of me. Now I want to hear what you all think. Were you aware of these arcade games from Atari? Have you ever played the arcade cabinets of these games? And if so, What was the experience like? Or do you feel that these were poor choices for the video? If so, which games should I feature next time? Let me know the answers to all these questions and more in the comments down below. And please consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing if you haven't already. We do 2 videos a week, so hit the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload. I also have a Patreon page and YouTube memberships. You can hit the join button below to become a YouTube member, or head over to patreon.com/7800progamer and join there. Either way, you get access to some exclusive special feature style videos and audios, and you get a shout out at the end of every video. So thank you to My Own Celestial, OG Hugo, Head Trauma Bob, Jolt7800, Ball Gobbler, Socrates63, Ben's the Spook, Mr. Shua TV, Jeremiah Thomas, and HugeAss79. You're all classy Atarians, and I appreciate the support. Also, check out the Discord server by clicking the link in the description below. You can use it to talk Atari with like-minded people, and it's free to join. And with all that said, it's time to wrap up this edition of Overlooked Atari Arcade Games. I'm the 7800 Pro Gamer, a flat-shaded polygon robot character trying to reach the vector-style base known as the Atari Network, and I'd like to thank you all for watching. And remember to stay classy, Atarians.